Revenge with Karen.
You ever watch a grown man grin while gutting your career on a Zoom call? I have. He looked like a smug raccoon who just found a rotisserie chicken in a dumpster, gnawing through protocol like it was cling film. The CFO, new guy, fresh off some Ivy League finance cult, smirked into the camera and said, "We're adjusting your metrics retroactively." Just like that. Mid-meeting. In front of 24 colleagues, clients, HR, try to keep up next time. Added like I was a wayward intern who lost a post-it note, not the woman who'd practically duct-taped this entire enterprise success operation together for 6 years straight. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand what came before that smirk. You need to know who I was before the CFO's ego bled all over our quarterly dashboard. I was the quiet one. The just the numbers girl. You know the type, sits 2 seats from the window. It was the birthday of every legacy client, and drinks the same cold brew every morning because chaos is for execs and toddlers. My job, keeping our enterprise accounts alive. Onboarding, renewals, integration touchpoints, quarterly business reviews. If you've ever worked in SAW, you know that once the champagne from sales dries up, it's client success who gets stuck scrubbing the blood off the floor. I didn't need praise. I needed access. I built the onboarding playbook. I personally updated the risk models after the 2020 churn fiasco. I created the damn escalation matrix that half the sales team still uses, badly, but still. But here's the thing about doing your job too well. People stop seeing you as a person. You become infrastructure. Furniture. The seat that's always filled. The Slack notification that always answers within 6 minutes flat. And yeah, I saw the brunch pictures. I saw the VP of sales post a boomerang of bottomless mimosas with half the C-suite at that rooftop place that smells like citrus-scented privilege. But I wasn't in those photos. Not once. I didn't schmooze, didn't flirt, didn't laugh when the CRO made his casual sexism but in a dad joke remarks. I just did my job, met my KPIs. Surpassed them, in fact, though apparently that would come back to bite me. By the way, if you're still listening and haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and tap that button. It really does help more than you think. And throw us a like too. Keeps the lights on, and maybe, just maybe, gets me one step closer to finally replacing this cursed office chair that's been squeaking since the Obama administration. Anyway, back to the unglamorous glory of being invisible. I was the person they looped in when things were on fire. A $1 million client threatened to walk because someone in solutions promised an integration that didn't exist yet. Guess who they called? When legal needed a name for the MSA compliance summary, yep, me. When product couldn't figure out why their new dashboard pissed off half our beta users, I had the receipts, the survey data, the flagged comments, and the diplomacy to say, let's revisit that timeline instead of what moron approved this. None of that shows up in a selfie. None of that gets you a raise when the CFO only reads line items and LinkedIn endorsements from his college roommates. The changes started slow. A new dashboard here, a daily metrics report there. Then came the visibility sessions, which were really just a fancy term for public flogging of whoever underperformed that week. I dodged the first few, stayed quiet, adapted, because I'm not the kind of person who rocks the boat. I reinforce it. But then Q1 hit, and suddenly my numbers, my airtight, board-approved, client-signed-off numbers weren't good enough. They got adjusted, and not the good kind like, oops, we forgot a bonus. The kind that makes your dashboard turn red. The kind that makes it look like you dropped the ball, even though the game had already ended. That's when I started remembering something old, something buried in a compliance binder nobody's opened since the last reorg. Something I wrote, something I could use, but we'll get to that. Because before I pulled the trigger, I had to be sure. And the CFO, he had to keep smiling, for now. He came in wearing confidence like it was cologne, the kind that fogs up your judgment and makes interns nod too hard. First week, he renamed our client success Slack channel to Revenue Defense, posted a selfie from the executive bathroom mirror with the caption, "Let's optimize some damn pipelines." You ever feel your soul leave your body because of a hashtag? I did, #OpsBeast. I still see it in my nightmares. His name was Weston. Of course it was. The kind of name that sounds like it was chosen by a hedge fund manager and a golden retriever during a brand workshop. Tall, loud, wore those sneakers that look expensive but feel like entitlement, had things like growth mindset and synergistic uplift, and meant none of it. His LinkedIn said transformational leader. His eyes said I will feed this company into a woodchipper for a speaking gig. Weston didn't shake hands. He aligned visions. And apparently, he aligned ours right into the ninth circle of metric hell. From day one, it was dashboards. Dashboards for everything. Daily pulse checks, weekly scorecards, monthly retro realignments. Suddenly, I was logging into 6 different platforms just to prove I'd sent a calendar invite. He called it increasing transparency. I called it slowly waterboarding the team with Excel. And here's the thing, I know metrics. I love metrics. I sleep better next to clean retention curves. But Weston wasn't using them to understand performance. He was using them like throwing stars. Quiet threats wrapped in charts. If your renewal rate dropped by 2%, call you out in the Tuesday meeting. Looks like someone's bleeding ARR. If you added an extra hour to onboarding a legacy client because they used fax machines, you get a pink slide in the performance deck titled Lagging Contributors. He called these meetings data stand-ups. They felt more like public executions. At first, I stayed low, updated my numbers, played by the new rules even as they changed mid-game. And they did change. Slowly, subtly. Definitions warped. Suddenly, closed one didn't include accounts unless they had 2 upsells. Retention was now a 6-month rolling snapshot instead of annualized. My numbers, which had been solid, started drifting toward the danger zone without me changing a thing. That's when I knew something was wrong. Not wrong like, oops, spreadsheet error. Wrong like the casino just swapped the dice mid-roll and smiled about it. But even then, I didn't speak up. Think 6 years of building trust would make me bold. But here's the truth. When someone new wants to break the system, they don't start by flipping tables. They start by replacing the chairs. And I'd seen too many good people disappear one pivot at a time. Still, I watched, quietly, took screenshots, exported versions, made mental notes when the metrics definitions got reworded in the middle of the quarter. Weston said it was all part of the optimization journey. It started to feel like we were passengers on a plane where the pilot was both drunk and live streaming for likes. And the crew, too busy clapping to notice the nosedive. The team grew quiet. Slack channels once filled with GIFs and inside jokes turned into ghost towns. People stopped updating their statuses. Our onboarding manager, Beth, who'd been here longer than Weston's crypto phase, started ending every sentence with "I don't know anymore." Meanwhile, Weston strutted through every meeting like he'd just invented synergy. "We're going to make this operation bulletproof," he said once, sipping something green from a mason jar. "No more leaky buckets." I wanted to ask if he knew what caused leaks in the first place. Spoiler, it's usually the guy holding the drill. Then came the rumblings. A consultant from his old firm was joining as an advisor. Someone spotted her name on the backend permissions list before anyone announced it. Access level, same as mine. And suddenly, it all made sense. The dashboards, the adjustments, the public metric shame sessions. He wasn't trying to fix the system. He was prepping it for someone else. Someone who would walk in with glowing KPIs because the rest of us had already been measured against moving goalposts. And me, I was in the way. But Weston didn't know everything. He didn't know who wrote the original client success protocols, didn't know which compliance clauses still lived in the dusty bowels of our master agreements, didn't know which obscure contract variable could burn down his dashboard kingdom like a bug in the code. But I did, and I was still watching. It happened on a Thursday. Zoom all hands. You know, the kind, video on, mic off, performative nodding, while executives sling buzzwords like they're competing in a corporate spelling bee. Weston was already 4 slides into his Q1 optimization overview, voice smooth and smug like a used car salesman trying to rebrand a lemon as heritage vintage. I'd seen that tone before. It's the one people use when they're about to sell you out and pretend they're doing you a favor. I had my usual notepad in front of me, pen uncapped, notes already started. A habit, muscle memory. I was tracking renewals, trends, escalations, the actual work that kept us afloat. Then I heard my name. "Let's look at our enterprise retention performance for Q1, Weston said, tone flat but surgical. The slide changed. My name, my face, my metrics, big red arrows. A giant drop-off line like I'd driven the company bus off a cliff. "Now, some of these numbers may seem off," he said, already smirking. "It's because we've retroactively applied updated performance definitions for a clearer picture of value delivery." He paused, just long enough to let it burn. Unfortunately, that means some of our top performers from past quarters didn't quite keep up this time around, and then he did it. He turned directly to the camera, locked eyes through the screen like a predator pretending to smile. "Isn't that right, redacted, no title, no context, just my name, dangling in front of the team like a worm on a hook. He clicked to the next slide. A chart showing a 14% drop. Q1 retention, allegedly below target. Never mind that the definitions had changed 2 weeks ago. Never mind that the clients in question had already renewed under the original scope. Never mind that none of this had been mentioned, forecasted, or even documented in any prior meeting. Try to keep up next time, he added. I don't remember the rest of the meeting. Not really. What I do remember is the silence. Slack went dead. Screens froze in awkward stillness. HR, always loyal until loyalty threatens liability, looked down. The director of sales blinked hard, then minimized his window. No one spoke. I didn't either. I clicked unmute. Took a breath. Copy, I said. That's it. Not because I agreed, but because fury needs oxygen to ignite, and I had work to do. Behind my monitor, my hands didn't shake. But my pen pressed harder. My eyes scanned the screen and saw what Weston thought he'd accomplished. Public shaming, plausible deniability, and the final setup for his replacement to step into my role clean and unblemished. He thought I'd take it, that I'd shrink, that I'd go quietly. But he didn't know the system like I did. He didn't know I helped build it. Didn't know that when our compliance team was drafting enterprise-level service agreements 5 years ago, I'd been the one who flagged Clause 14.3, an obscure contractual clause tucked into our master services agreements with legacy clients. A clause written to protect them, but by extension, protect us. A clause no one remembered except me. Clause 14.3. If performance metrics tied to client-facing enterprise accounts are materially altered after execution of agreement, without client notification or consent, a reversion process is triggered. That reversion, it pauses billing, it flags accounts, it demands a full compliance audit. In other words, if Weston moved the goalposts, the game reset, and the scoreboard wiped clean. And guess who had access to the triggers? Guess who was still listed on the internal change tracking system as the compliance originator? Guess who had kept every version of every MSA update backed up, time-stamped, archived, and sorted? That day, after the call, I didn't cry. I didn't pace the kitchen. I didn't call my sister or vent to Beth or even message legal. I opened my terminal, logged in with the same ID Weston had just humiliated, pulled up the legacy compliance dashboard, searched for one specific client account, an account Weston had flagged in the Q1 underperformance summary, one whose renewal Weston had already bragged about in the board update. I reviewed the retention timeline, matched it to the adjusted metric timestamp, cross-referenced the audit log, and smiled. It had been altered post-agreement, without documentation, without consent. Exactly what Clause 14.3 was built for. The trigger was right there. Waiting. Dormant, all I had to do was nudge it awake. It was nearly midnight when I opened the binder. Not the physical one. Those had long since been boxed, archived, and forgotten in the supply closet under the broken laminator. I'm talking about the digital kind. The old internal contract repository. The one only 5 people ever used, 2 of whom had since retired, and one of whom still thought cloud referred to the weather. Had to access it through an internal VPN tunnel with a password so outdated it still had a $sign for flair. I hadn't touched this portal in years, but I knew exactly where to look. The system creaked like an old man's knees as it loaded. Legacy, folders, protocol PDFs, version-controlled contract addenda dating back to our pre-series of days. And there it was, buried deep in a subfolder with a charmingly blunt name. Client Protections, Old Beta, Do Not Delete. Inside that graveyard was the reason I didn't flinch when Weston went full knife in the back during the all-hands call. Section 14. Specifically, Clause 14.3 of our Enterprise MSA, a little compliance gem we crafted during the chaotic growth spike 5 years ago, back when clients were rightfully nervous that we might bait and switch them with overly rosy performance metrics to lock in renewals. Our legal team, well, I, actually, proposed a safeguard. If internal performance definitions tied to client-facing KPIs were tampered with or revised post-agreement, a reversion clause would trigger. The clause didn't just freeze billing. It demanded compliance review, voided the performance score retroactively, and required the affected accounts be placed on manual hold, meaning no automated renewals, no progress to goal dashboards, no upsell eligibility until cleared by legal. And because we thought no one would ever be dumb or arrogant enough to try and fudge numbers after a contract was in motion, it was buried, dormant, forgotten. A safety valve built for reputation insurance, till Weston came along with his vanity metrics and petty power games. I read the clause again, word by word. The language was airtight. No legal gray space, no soft phrasing. The moment a post-facto metric change impacted a legacy enterprise client's account status without documented mutual consent, that clause could activate. And Weston had been tweaking metrics like a toddler playing with the thermostat. No client consent. No notifications logged, just internal dashboards updated in the shadows and presented like gospel at the all-hands meeting. He'd even listed specific accounts in the Q1 slides. That was his fatal error. He assumed the data was his to reshape. He didn't realize the data had a memory, and I knew exactly which nerve to pinch to make it scream. I pulled up the trigger conditions, time-stamped metric revisions, cross-referenced against contract ID. I needed just one provable instance, one legacy enterprise client whose original KPIs had been altered under Weston's retroactive performance enhancement initiative. I didn't sleep. I cross-checked dashboard logs against our internal metric change journal, which, thanks to a forgotten auto-backup script I'd written in 2019, still preserved a hidden audit trail no one remembered. And there it was. Client, Prestera Industrial Solutions. Contract signed, May 2021. Legacy compliance coverage. Original Q1 performance metric, 92% integration efficiency. Revised metric per Weston's dashboard, 78% efficiency, revised March 6, 10:42 a.m., 2 weeks after the original client renewal was approved. No notification sent. No update logged in the CRM timeline. No mutual consent documentation in the legal folder. Violation. I double-checked. Triple-checked. Clause lit up like a flare gun in the dark. If I submitted this, just this one, through the legacy compliance change tracking system, the reversion process would begin. A ripple that could pause millions in projected revenue and alert legal in less time than it takes Weston to say optimize. But I hesitated, not because I doubted the clause, or my math, or the ethics. I hesitated because this would be the moment I stepped out of invisibility. I'd no longer be the numbers girl. I'd be the woman who weaponized the system against its own predators. And once the clause fired, I couldn't pull it back. So I sat there, blinking at the screen, breathing in the silence of a world that had never made room for women like me to strike first. And I clicked, flagged the entry, submitted the discrepancy. The system blinked once, processing, then spat back, clause 14.3 triggered. Escalation pending. I leaned back in my chair, hands steady. The system had been dormant for years, but it had sharp teeth, and now it remembered how to bite. The first tremor hit around 3:17 p.m. It started small. A Slack ping from legal in one of those rarely used channels no one dares leave, titled something like Contract Audit Legacy 2020. No emoji reactions, no GIFs. Just a message, dry as kindling. We've received a flag on Prestera Industrial. Pulling logs, I didn't reply, didn't have to. The system already had. Earlier that day, I'd followed protocol strictly by the book. Opened the change tracking interface, logged the discrepancy, and cross-referenced it to the original Prestera contract. Noted the metric manipulation, performance definition adjusted mid-quarter, post-renewal, no notice sent. Attached the evidence trail, timestamped dashboard screenshots, CRM export, log pull from the automated backup script Weston didn't know existed. It was a clean report. No commentary, no finger-pointing, just data, just truth. And once submitted, the machine came alive. You see, the legacy compliance system didn't ask permission. It ran on the logic of law, not politics. Once conditions were met and confirmed, it began its sequence. First, it sent an auto-acknowledgement. Clause 14.3 triggered. Escalation pending. It started pinging the chain. Legal, finance, client success, and eventually Weston. I imagined him seeing it for the first time, a clause number he'd never heard of, attached to a contract he'd never read, linked to a client he'd bragged about onboarding in front of the board just last week. A client now suddenly paused, because that's what reversion meant. Not just paperwork, not just a sternly worded memo. It meant the Prestera renewal froze, billing paused, client communication entered manual compliance review. No upsells, no expansion, no great news, outreach campaigns from marketing. Just a polite email from legal stating, "We've identified a discrepancy in performance metrics that require third-party audit before continuation." In our world, that kind of disruption might as well be an earthquake. And for once, I wasn't under the rubble. By 8:42 p.m., the noise began. I watched Weston's name light up the Slack sidebar. Message after message. Not to me, of course, to legal, to product, to the VP of sales, to a random paralegal who probably hadn't seen daylight since Q3. What is this clause? Why are we freezing Prestora? Who approved this audit? Why didn't I know about 14.3? I could practically hear the smug leaking out of his pores. VP of sales responded with a single question. Did we alter metrics after signature? No reply. Then another message popped up from our legal director. She was one of the few remaining execs I trusted, sharp, quiet, dangerous in a deposition. She wrote, "The clause appears valid. System triggered per protocol. Originator, redacted. He must have seen my name attached to the submission." I pictured his jaw locking, that vein on his temple, always throbbing when someone interrupted his slides, probably looked like a fire hose. But he still didn't ping me directly. Cowards rarely do. Instead, he tried to call a late meeting with legal to clarify definitions and reframe the conversation. They declined. I sat in my apartment, watching the little digital footprints scramble through Slack and Gmail, sipping chamomile tea like it was whiskey. Same woman he tried to humiliate on a public call was now causing his dashboard kingdom to fracture under one quiet submission. And he had no idea what else I had queued. Because here's the thing about legacy clauses. Once one fires, they all wake up. It's like poking the first domino. The system now had a reason to check every other legacy contract for similar violations. All it took was one confirmed breach to trigger the global compliance crawl. Check the log. 3 more accounts had been flagged for review automatically. Weston had built his empire on performance inflation, and I had just turned on the audit, but I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. This wasn't revenge, it was compliance. And compliance doesn't get drunk and text its ex. It sits in silence and files receipts. Because I wasn't done, not even close. By Friday morning, the panic had spread like a gas leak, colorless, soundless, deadly. It started with Prestora's account manager getting a short, sterile email. Due to internal reporting inconsistencies and perceived instability in your staffing model, Prestora is placing all upcoming payments on hold until a compliance resolution is finalized. Translation: you moved the goalposts. Now we're taking the ball and going home. That one sentence detonated 3 departments. Sales was the first to unravel. I could hear it from 2 Slack channels away. Hence pings, call transcripts flooding in, a hastily scheduled 10:15 a.m. Revenue impact workshop that was really just a bunch of people yelling what the hell happened into mute buttons. Forecasts were suddenly off by 7 figures. The Q2 growth trajectory, Weston's sacred cow, collapsed like a flan in a cupboard. Prestora wasn't just another client. They were legacy. Influential. The kind of client we built our enterprise suite around. Been part of investor pitch decks, testimonial videos, glossy case studies with big red upward arrows and glowing pull quotes. And now they were citing unstable staffing metrics and publicly questioning the integrity of our internal performance tracking. And it wasn't just Prestora. 2 more accounts, also flagged by the reversion clause, began whispering concerns. One VP emailed their account lead asking if the onboarding team had been replaced or downgraded. Another flat out demanded a compliance call before the next payment cycle. Weston, who had spent the week pretending the clause was a minor footnote in a dusty binder, suddenly found himself hosting a full-blown fire drill. At 11:27 a.m., we were all summoned. Emergency leadership alignment, the invite said. A Zoom room filled up. Black boxes, tight faces, silent fear. Weston Square was the only one lit. And oh, he was sweating, not literally. Not yet, but his voice had that tense, forced casualness that only shows up when someone realizes the floor beneath them was built from cheap veneer. "Okay," he began, hands clapping once as if trying to summon order from chaos. "Let's talk through the Prestora situation. I want to clarify that these disruptions are the result of administrative rigidity in our outdated compliance system. We're looking into adjustments that were, honestly, and to improve our performance visibility, but were perhaps interpreted a bit too technically." A few faces twitched. HR blinked like they were watching a legal horror film play out in real time. Then Weston did the one thing you should never do when you're bleeding in the shark tank. He tried to pin it on me. Some of these compliance flags originated from legacy systems filed by redacted, he said, glancing directly into the camera. And I'll just say, might have been more appropriate to surface concerns through internal channels before triggering external consequences. Translation, she tattled to the system. Now the system's snitching back. I didn't even blink. I unmuted. 1 beat. 2. Everything I said, my voice level, cool, steady, was filed per contract. No deviation. Clause 14.3 remains an active compliance protocol. You can verify all timestamps. Silence landed like a brick through glass. No fluff, no denial, just the dry, clinical finality of legal truth. Weston shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Legal counsel, sitting one frame above him in the gallery view, leaned in and said, "That's correct. We've reviewed the logs. All escalations were triggered automatically per clause conditions." Then came the whisper, not out loud, not in the meeting, but through Slack DMs, through hallway mutterings, through back-channel coffee chats and emoji-laced "OMG, did you see?" messages. She knew exactly what she was doing. I saw it in the eyes of the product director, who'd once called my team retention janitors. I saw it in the way the VP of sales stopped smirking during slide reviews. I even saw it in the way legal responded to my follow-up email, not with delay, but with respect. The script had flipped. For years, I'd been the quiet one, the fail-safe, backup parachute nobody thought they'd need. Now, I was the line in the contract they wished they'd read closer. And Weston, he was starting to realize that for all his dashboards and flexed KPIs, he'd never bothered to learn how the real machinery worked. The machine that didn't care about charm, the one that only respected protocol, and protocol was now hungry. The second clause hit Monday morning like a bullet through the break room window. This one wasn't quiet. No whispers, no gentle escalations. It triggered an alert in the global CRM feed, a crimson banner across the top of every legacy client dashboard, warning renewal validation required, pre-adjustment compliance audit pending. MSA Clause 14.4 engaged. The timing couldn't have been worse for Weston. Quarter end was 2 weeks away. Renewal calls were already scheduled. Deals that had been paraded in executive forecasting meetings were now screeching to a halt because the system, the same one I helped build back when we still printed out client contracts, had decided it no longer trusted the numbers. The clause was simple, brutal in its simplicity. If internal performance definitions were altered after agreement, without mutual documentation, renewals could not be processed until an external audit recertified the account's metrics. Weston's dashboard tweaks didn't just burn credibility. They torched our ability to collect money. By 10:03 a.m., 2 high-value clients, Coltrax Energy and Delancey Systems, had issued formal requests for compliance clarification. Their phrasing was lethal in its neutrality. "We appreciate your ongoing efforts to modernize performance metrics. In light of recent adjustments, we request a review of pre-adjustment baselines to ensure alignment with original contract terms before executing our renewals." Translation, "We don't trust you anymore. Prove it or we walk." And with each email like that, Weston's empire lost another tooth. At 12:26 p.m., I got the invite. One line, no context. Subject, private compliance alignment, board review participants. General counsel, EP finance, lead client legal me, Weston no agenda. No deck. Just a single time slot carved out like a courtroom summons. When I joined the call, 4 faces filled the screen. Legal, stone-faced. Finance. Brows furrowed, jaw tight. Weston, pale. Less raccoon, more ferret caught in the garbage disposal. He didn't even say hello. Just leaned in toward his webcam and hissed, "Wait, that clause that wasn't active." Right, was the first time he addressed me directly since the all-hands ambush. The panic in his voice wasn't performative anymore. He was genuinely afraid, not because he thought he was wrong, but because he was finally realizing I might have known more than he did all along. General counsel didn't flinch. She looked over her glasses, deadpan, and delivered the kill shot like it was a routine weather report. It's been active since onboarding. She helped draft it. Clause was part of the legacy MSA suite approved in 2021. Your metric adjustments violated client-facing baseline agreements without disclosure. Weston's lips parted like he had a rebuttal, but nothing came out. Just this quiet, stunned little breath. It was the first time I'd seen him small. He leaned back in his chair, blinking, trying to recalibrate. You could tell he was sifting through every meeting, every email, every offhand dismissal he'd lobbed my way. Looking for the moment he lost control, only to realize he never had it to begin with. I stayed quiet, just watched, didn't gloat, didn't smirk. I didn't have to, the room had already turned. VP Finance, who once forwarded my status reports without reading them, was now asking me for clarification on clause conditions. Legal, who used to refer to me as ops adjacent, now treated my presence like a critical component of structural integrity. Even the board's compliance rep, who I'd met once during an onboarding workshop 4 years ago, nodded toward me and said, "We may need her support more centrally." And Weston, he was no longer the center of gravity. The man who weaponized metrics like knives was now bleeding from every line item on the balance sheet. Because those little clauses, they weren't fine print, they were landmines, and I was the only one who remembered where they were buried. I ended the call with a single sentence, measured, professional, irreversibly damning. Happy to provide full audit support, pending confirmation of system integrity. Click, call ended, and with it, the illusion of his control. The power had shifted. For the first time, everyone saw me, not as a number, not as a liability, but as what I had always been, the architect and the reckoning. The next invite came quietly. Oh, grand announcement. No CEO town hall. Just a simple line in my inbox the following Tuesday morning. You've been added to the Compliance Advisory Committee. Temporary appointment pending board review. No one explained it. No one needed to. Because by then, Weston was already gone. Not officially, of course. The board doesn't do drama. There was no memo. No Slack post. No Dear Team email filled with empty gratitude and buzzwords about new beginnings. Instead, his name just stopped appearing. No more calendar invites. No more approvals routed through his dashboard. No more all-hands monologues. Just a note in a private doc, shared among directors. CFO suspended from active participation, pending internal review of metric protocol breaches. The spreadsheet of shame, basically. I walked past his office the next day, door half open, screens black, air stale. His desk, once cluttered with protein bars and wireless earbuds and performance decks no one asked for, now sat still. Empty. Like the air had finally decided it was done hosting his ego. People adjusted fast. They always do when power shifts. The sales VP, who once publicly questioned why my team took so long to onboard legacy clients, now slid into my inbox with a meek, "Would love your input on renewal clause risks." When you get a sec, Eagle asked if I could review historical compliance triggers for cross-account trends. The same team that once forgot to CC me on protocol updates now forwarded everything with subject lines like urgent, redacted needs your eyes. It was surreal. Like watching actors in a play suddenly realize the stage manager could pull the curtain at any moment. But I didn't gloat. Not out loud, anyway. In meetings, I spoke the way I always had, measured, clear, documented, no frills. I wasn't there to celebrate, I was there to stabilize. The house Weston built on sand was still standing, technically, but my job now was making sure the foundation underneath stopped shifting, which meant policy rewrites, new escalation procedures, clause workshops, and of course, audits, lots of audits. I sat in on my first advisory committee meeting wearing the same cardigan I always wore. No power suit, no lipstick armor. Just me, a legal pad, and a system full of ghosts I'd helped bury. I answered every question, flagged every risk, outlined the backup protocol Weston had ignored when he built his pretty performance dashboards. And when someone tried to suggest that maybe the clause was too aggressive, I gently reminded them that clients like Prestora weren't still paying us out of kindness. They were paying because the system worked, because someone made sure it did. And now they knew who that someone was. I never brought up the all-hands meeting, never quoted Weston's smirk to try to keep up next time. But I saw it playing behind their eyes every time I spoke. They remembered. HR remembered. Even the board's representative, who once forgot my name during a strategy dinner, now addressed me with careful precision. Can we defer to redacted on that? She has the deepest knowledge of our original framework. Damn right I did. But I still nodded, smiled politely, replied, happy to advise. They didn't know that I'd kept every message, every Slack thread, every post-meeting memo where Weston framed my team as inefficient or legacy limited. Not for vengeance, for record, because memory is a accountability best friend, and I wasn't naive. I knew my seat was temporary. Politics don't change just because one man got benched. Another would rise. There's always someone ready to put their name on someone else's system. But now they knew I wasn't background noise. Now, when the lights flickered and the metrics trembled, they didn't look up. They looked at me, and I didn't flinch. I just flipped the page in my legal pad and asked, "Do you want the clean version or the one with teeth?" The bulletin dropped at 8:41 a.m. sharp, like a verdict from Olympus. Subject: Policy Update, Legacy Metrics Compliance Body. Effective immediately. All internal performance metric revisions must undergo pre-deployment audit per Legacy Master Services Agreement, MSA, protocols. Oversight assigned to redacted, lead compliance auditor, legacy framework. I read it once. Then again. Just to feel the weight settle. No big meeting, no backslaps or confetti, just cold policy. Binding, undeniable. The very system Weston tried to twist into a throne had now crowned someone else. Me, not by favor or politics or popularity, but by proof. Clause by clause, trigger by trigger, data by data. The board had done what the system demanded, not protect the loudest voice, but elevate the most accurate one. That same morning, another internal message made its quiet rounds through HR channels, though it didn't need much explanation. CFO Weston Brandt will be transitioning out of his current role to explore new opportunities. Thank him for his service. Translation: he broke the machine. The machine broke back. The dashboards he once curated like works of modern art now sat under lock and key. Every performance number routed through a compliance pipeline I now owned. Every adjustment request needed my sign-off. Every QBR forecast required a pre-validation stamp with my initials. The noise had been replaced with rigor, and Weston, no linked in post. No farewell happy hour. Was gone, a ghost in the CRM logs. It felt quiet, not triumphant, not giddy, just settled, like a long-held breath finally exhaled. I sat at my desk, same chair, same mug, same calendar with the quote from that client who once said, "We stay because she gets it done." I scrolled through my inbox, reading through the final compliance reports. Numbers were adjusting themselves back into sanity. Clients were reaffirming commitments. Sales had stabilized. Tension projections were climbing again, this time for the right reasons. And then, like a heartbeat, the final email flashed on my screen. Subject: Reversion complete body, accounts reinstated, revenue adjusted. Clause 14 fulfilled, no emojis, no flair, just completion. Closure. The system had bitten back, not with rage, not with spectacle, but with precision. Like a circuit breaker snapping into place after years of neglect. And me? I didn't celebrate. I opened a new doc, named it Protocol Amendment Proposal Q3 because peace doesn't last forever. Eventually, someone else will try to bypass the system, try to cut corners, try to clip a metric or massage a dashboard and hope no one notices. But now they will. Now they'll think twice before assuming the quiet one doesn't have claws. They'll remember that compliance isn't just a department. It's a shield, and sometimes it's a sword, because I never needed to yell, never had to storm the room or throw chairs or stage some dramatic walkout. All I had to do was follow the rules, the ones they signed, the ones I wrote, the ones that, in the end, spoke louder than Weston ever could. Justice, it turns out, doesn't need a spotlight, it just needs a trigger. And mine fired clean. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.